When I hired Sami, he introduced himself with a smile, a picture of his beautiful wife, and a reputation for being a devout man of faith. What I didn't know was that underneath all that was a predator. And when he tried to force himself on a young woman who worked for me, she chose not to press charges. But I did something else. Something permanent. Because some men don't deserve silence. They deserve consequences. If you've ever wanted to see someone vile get exactly what they deserve, without breaking the law, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and comment below with the most satisfying justice you've ever seen. Let's dive in. The calm before the storm. It was a lazy weekend evening when my phone rang, snapping me out of my rare moment of relaxation. I run a small but growing restaurant business in a country that relies heavily on expat labor. We sponsor dozens of foreign workers for jobs ranging from serving and cooking to cleaning and driving. On the other end of the line was one of my managers, their voice tight with worry. One of our employees, let's call her Janice, had been picked up by the police for what they described as indecent exposure. That alone was enough to jolt me upright. Wait, what? I asked, pulling myself off the couch. Indecent exposure. The details spilled out quickly. Janice had been caught in a compromising situation with a man in a private booth at a restaurant 2 doors down from ours. The police had walked in, apparently without warning, and found the two of them mid-hookup. Clothes still mostly on, but the guy's junk was out. The officers weren't amused. They were stern but didn't escalate the situation. After some scolding and an intimidating warning about deportation, they let them go, with a signed pledge never to repeat the offense. It was, in bureaucratic terms, a slap on the wrist. A promise extracted under pressure. No official charges, but the threat hung in the air. I exhaled heavily. On one hand, Janice had clearly done something incredibly foolish. But something wasn't sitting right. As the story settled in my mind, one nagging thought wouldn't go away. How the hell did the police know to walk straight to the back booth? How did they know something was going on? The staff at that restaurant hadn't caught them. No manager had called the cops. So how? It didn't take long for the gears in my mind to start turning. The next morning, I called the restaurant to ask a few casual questions. Had their staff seen anything that night? Maybe someone overheard something? Maybe the couple was loud? Nope. The staff hadn't seen a thing. Not until the police arrived. In fact, the restaurant manager told me, no one from law enforcement had ever set foot inside until that night. Yet somehow, they marched right in and made a beeline for the couple's booth like they had a GPS pin dropped. That was when it hit me. Someone called them. Someone knew exactly where Janice was going. Someone had been watching. And I already had a suspect. Later that day, I called Janice into my office. She looked nervous, unsure of what kind of talk this would be. I started gently. I asked for her version of events and reassured her that we all make mistakes and that her job was safe. My only concern was her well-being, and making sure something like this didn't become a pattern. She looked relieved. But then I shifted the conversation. Janice, this might sound odd, I said, but do you have any idea who could have called the police on you that night? Her eyes didn't waver. No hesitation. Sami, she said. It had to be Sami. Sami was one of our drivers. He was the one who drove Janice to that restaurant that night. That much I knew, his shift logs confirmed it. Why would he do that? I asked, trying to stay neutral. Because he's obsessed with me, she said. He's been hitting on me for months. Kept asking me out, pressuring me. And once, he tried to force himself on me. I pushed him away and told him if he ever tried again, I'd scream. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't help myself. Why didn't you come to me or your manager right away? Janice looked down. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He stopped after that. And I didn't want to be the reason someone lost their job. Plus, I didn't want to talk to the police. My fists clenched. I understood. I really did. Victims of assault often stay silent because the system isn't kind to them. Especially in this part of the world, where being foreign adds another layer of fear. But I was furious. Sami didn't just get away with it. he retaliated. And now Janice had to live with both experiences. She declined to press charges, and I respected her decision. But I wasn't going to let this go. I called Sami into my office later that afternoon. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. I didn't know how he would react. I didn't even know how I would open the conversation. So I started indirectly. "You've heard about Janice's incident this weekend." His face lit up like a child showing off a report card. "Heard about it," he said proudly. "I called it in." The audacity stunned me. "You called the police?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, but my jaw was tightening. Yes, he said. "She's a troublemaking woman." I dropped her off and waited to see who she was meeting. I saw a man go in after her, a married man, and I called the police. It is against God's law. Against man's law. There it was. The self-righteousness. The smug grin. The absolute certainty that he had done something noble. I wanted to puke. "Sami," I said slowly, "why didn't you call me or your manager if you were so concerned?" Silence. His eyes dropped. Feet shuffled. He realized, too late, that he'd just admitted to a premeditated act of sabotage. "You know what you did," I said, my voice now low and razor-sharp. "Janice told me everything." He muttered under his breath, "I only tried once, sir." "That did it. You're done," I snapped. "You're fired. And your flight home leaves in 4 hours. I already bought the ticket. Pack your things. Don't come back." His face turned pale. The grin was gone. But that wasn't enough for me. I watched Sami leave the office, shoulders slumped, face drained of every ounce of confidence. But even as the door shut behind him, I wasn't satisfied. Yes, I'd fired him. Yes, I was sending him back to his home country on the next available flight. But that wasn't justice. That was damage control. That was plugging a leak when a pipe had already burst. He had tried to assault a young woman, one of my employees. And when he didn't get what he wanted, he plotted revenge. He weaponized morality and pretended to be the voice of God and virtue while trying to destroy someone who had already suffered at his hands. And it almost worked. He could have ruined Janice's life. Just one wrong move from the police that night and she'd have been deported, blacklisted, shamed, and silenced. No, not good enough. So I sat at my desk and opened my drawer. Inside was an old, coffee-stained folder we kept for reference, original hard-copy CVS from older hires. Sami's was there, buried beneath a few others. I pulled it out, flipped it open, and there it was, his home phone number. A landline. I remembered calling it years ago to set up his initial interview. That was where his wife lived. The one he showed us pictures of. The one he'd bragged about. She was younger than him by a good margin. Mid-20s, if I remembered correctly. Pretty. Soft-spoken. Too good for me, Sami once joked. Too good for a monster like him, that was for sure. I waited. I watched the flight updates on my phone, refreshing every 10 minutes. I made sure the plane was in the air, halfway across the sky and unreachable. And then I dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a woman picked up. Her voice was quiet, formal. "Hello. Hello. Mrs. Sami." "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is redacted. I'm your husband's employer."
Oh.
I was. Up until a few hours ago. A pause. Then a cautious, yes. "I'm calling to inform you that your husband has been terminated from our company and is currently on a flight home. I thought you should know why." I heard her inhale sharply. "I had to fire him," I continued. "Because he attempted to sexually assault one of his co-workers. A woman half his age. She didn't press charges, but that doesn't mean he didn't do it." Another sharp gasp, louder this time. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but I thought you had a right to know." I hung up before she could respond. I didn't need to hear what came next. I just sat there in silence, heart pounding in my chest, staring at the blank wall in front of me. For a long moment, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt still. Let me take a step back. I'm not someone who enjoys ruining people. I'm not someone who seeks vengeance for every little mistake. I run a business. I've dealt with every kind of employee, from slackers and liars to hustlers and quiet workhorses. You get used to personalities. You get used to flaws. But there's a line. Sami didn't just cross it. He spit on it, burned it, and danced on the ashes. He was one of those men who wore morality like armor when it suited him, but used it like a weapon when he needed control. He called Janice a troublemaking woman as if he hadn't tried to force himself on her. He lectured me about divine law as if he wasn't stalking someone, watching her movements, and then sicking the police on her because she dared have a life that didn't include him. He was a coward, and I needed him to be unmasked. Not just fired. Not just sent away. I wanted that facade ripped off. Because monsters like him don't stop unless they're forced to. I didn't hear back from the wife. Not for days. Then, one afternoon the following week, I got a WhatsApp message from a foreign number. It was short. Thank you. I believed you. He won't hurt anyone again. That was all it said. But that was all I needed. In the weeks that followed, things settled back into normalcy at the restaurant. Janice continued working, head held high. I noticed a new confidence in her, like the weight of something heavy had been lifted. She never mentioned Sami again. Neither did I. But something changed in the team. People noticed. They saw how I handled it. Word got around fast. And though no one said it out loud, I saw it in their eyes. Relief. Security. Trust. They knew I had their back. And as an employer, that meant everything. Because in places like this, where foreign workers walk a tightrope every day between opportunity and deportation, it's easy to feel powerless. Like the rules don't protect you. Like your pain isn't valid. But in my business, that's not how we do things. About 2 weeks after the dust had settled, I found myself reflecting on the whole ordeal. On what it revealed, not just about Sami, or even about Janice, but about myself. And the systems around us. See, when I first started this restaurant, I had one mission: to build something meaningful. Not just for myself, but for the people I hired. I'd been in their shoes, working long hours in a foreign country, hoping that someone above me gave a damn about whether I succeeded or failed. So I promised myself I wouldn't be the kind of boss who looked the other way when things got ugly. But this wasn't just about standing up for Janice. This was about standing against a culture of silence. About making sure everyone knew that even when legal systems failed, there could still be consequences. And I realized something else too. Sami never once denied what he did. When I confronted him, he didn't argue. He didn't lie. He mumbled, "I only tried once, sir," like that somehow made it better. That single sentence stuck with me. Because it revealed everything. The entitlement. The lack of remorse. The idea that his behavior might be forgivable, simply because he didn't succeed. But the truth is, attempting to violate someone's body isn't a mistake. It's not a lapse in judgment. It's a character flaw so deep that no apology can erase it. A few days later, one of my managers, Amir, knocked on my office door. He stepped in quietly and said, "Boss, the team's been asking something. Off the record." I raised an eyebrow. They want to know what really happened with Sami. They heard bits and pieces, but nothing official. I nodded slowly. What have they heard? That he did something bad. That you sent him home. That he got reported. I leaned back in my chair, thinking carefully. "All right," I said. "Call a team meeting. No managers, just me and them." Later that evening, I stood in front of the full staff, minus Janice. I'd given her the night off, both out of respect and because I didn't want her to feel exposed. Everyone else was there. Some looked nervous. Others curious. "I know you've all heard that Sami is no longer with us," I began. Murmurs and nods. I won't go into graphic details, because I want to protect the privacy of the people involved. But I will tell you this much. Sami crossed a line. A serious line. He violated the trust of a coworker, made her feel unsafe, and then tried to damage her further when she didn't give him what he wanted. The room went silent. I fired him. I sent him home. And I did what I could to make sure he answered for what he did. I scanned the room. Not a single pair of eyes looked away. Let me make something clear. This workplace, this family, we don't protect predators. We don't excuse abuse. And we damn sure don't ignore the pain of our colleagues. If anyone here ever feels unsafe, unheard, or threatened, you come to me. You won't be punished. You won't be shamed. You'll be protected. And then, for the first time in that building's history, I saw something I'd never seen before. Applause. Quiet at first. Then louder. Someone even wiped a tear away. I didn't cry. But I felt something crack open inside me. Something raw. Something right. A week later, Janice came into my office. She was holding a small box of pastries from a bakery down the street. She placed them on my desk and smiled. I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly. You don't have to, I replied. What happened wasn't your fault. You shouldn't have had to deal with any of it. She nodded. I know. But still, thank you for not pretending it didn't happen. That means a lot. We talked for a bit, about work, about her goals. She told me she wanted to take an online business course and maybe start a catering service one day. I offered to sponsor her tuition. She burst into tears. Not because of the money, but because she'd been seen, heard, believed. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. But the story didn't quite end there. Remember the restaurant 2 doors down? The one where Janice and her friend had gotten caught? Well, a few days later, their manager came over during lunch rush. He was visibly uncomfortable, twisting his wedding ring nervously. I heard what happened with your driver, he said, carefully. I nodded. Yeah. I just wanted to say, that guy tried the same thing with one of our hostesses about a year ago. My stomach dropped. She didn't report it either, he added. Same reasons. Fear. Shame. She left the country not long after. Never told anyone until recently. I clenched my jaw. So Sami had a pattern. This wasn't a one-time offense. It was just the first time someone said no and survived to tell the story. I thanked the manager for telling me, and that night, I sat with the realization that there were likely others, women who hadn't come forward. Women who never would. But that just reinforced why I did what I did. Because predators like Sami survive in silence. And silence is something I could no longer afford. Weeks turned into months. Sami's name faded from our daily conversations, but the effect of what happened didn't. Something had changed in our workplace. Something intangible, but powerful. There was a new kind of openness. The back-of-house staff, who used to stay quiet during meetings, now spoke freely. The servers were more willing to report inappropriate customer behavior. One of the newer hires even came to me privately about a manager in another branch who was making them uncomfortable. And because of what happened with Janice, I didn't hesitate to act. I launched a full investigation, put that manager on leave, and made it clear, again, that we would protect our people over profits every time. It was like everyone had taken a collective breath and realized, we're allowed to speak up now. But it wasn't just about safety. It was about dignity, empowerment, culture. My restaurant became more than a workplace. It became a safe haven for people who had been passed over, silenced, underestimated, especially women. Especially immigrants. We even started monthly check-ins where employees could voice anonymous concerns. I brought in a counselor to meet with staff. We implemented a formal sexual harassment training program, something I was embarrassed to admit we'd never had before. All of it because one woman said no, and another person decided that just firing the perpetrator wasn't enough. I kept in touch with Janice after she left us nearly a year later. She didn't leave because of what happened, she left because of what she wanted. Bigger dreams. She got a job at a boutique catering company, and with my reference and a bit of extra funding, she started her own side hustle doing small events and pop-up dinners. We'd text every now and then. Sometimes she'd send pictures of her latest dishes, beautiful, colorful plates filled with love. The kind of food that came from people who had stories to tell. One day, she texted me out of the blue. Got a new contract. First big client. It's a women's NGO. I'm feeding 120 survivors of domestic abuse next week. I'm scared but excited. I stared at the message for a long time. From a terrified employee who didn't want to cause a fuss, to a woman serving survivors with strength and pride. I felt more pride in her than I could put into words. I replied simply, "You've already done the hard part. Now just cook." As for Sami, I don't know what happened to him. I never followed up. I never wanted to know. Some people don't deserve epilogues. They deserve to be forgotten. But if his wife left him that day like I hoped, and if his mother disowned him for disgracing their family name, then maybe, just maybe, there was some justice left behind. I sometimes wonder what was going through his head on that flight back home. Whether he thought about Janice. Whether he thought about the others. Whether he realized how lucky he'd been all these years to slip through the cracks, and how, finally, his luck ran out. Maybe he thought about the job he lost. Maybe he hated me. Maybe he told himself he was the victim. I don't really care. Because in the end, justice isn't about what the villain feels. It's about who gets to breathe again. I tell this story not for applause. Not for attention. But because someone else out there, maybe another small business owner, maybe another employee afraid to speak up, is sitting in silence, unsure what to do when a predator walks among them. Let me say this as clearly as I can. If someone violates trust under your roof, it is your moral obligation to act. Not just to cover legal ground, but to restore what was broken: safety, dignity, humanity. You may not be able to change the world, but you can change your corner of it. That's where real revenge lies, not in spite, but in protection. Not in punishment, but in power. The power to say, "Not here. Not on my watch." And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. People often confuse revenge with cruelty. But sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is simply ensuring someone like Sami never gets another chance to harm. It's protecting the innocent. It's standing up when the world tells you to sit down. And it's reminding everyone watching, there is still justice to be found, even if you have to build it yourself. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button. Like the video so more people hear what justice can look like when silence is no longer an option. And drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Or better yet, have you ever had to deliver justice when no one else would? Thanks for watching. And remember, courage is contagious. Pass it on.